in the V&A enjoying the details. I had to get out of the house to the V&A because there's an exhibition that they will speak about Yemen. Today you will hear with me a very interesting story. The V&A decided to care for looted ancient Yemeni funeral stones that was found in an East London interior design shop. The police found it, and the museum has an agreement now with the Republic of Yemen to temporarily house, research and conserve the stele before they are repatriated, which means sent back to Yemen. And then you'll hear from Alia Ali, an artist from Yemen, who shares her experience with the V&A as well and show us more of her creativity and how Yemen has influenced her art, and also coming from a mixed background. You'll see all of this through her art here and hear these interesting facts.
We are, of course, joining a story here in the middle of its flow. In fact, I'd like to spend a bit of my time today going backwards yet again, this time to the discovery of the stele in East London in 2020. The shopkeeper seemed rather taken aback. He revealed that he had an informal relationship with an individual who had provided the objects on commission for sale, but truly had little knowledge of the objects themselves. At this point, the police seized the property, as they had reasonable grounds to believe that the stele was stolen property from Yemen, and they believed the seizure was necessary. These objects were only in the custodianship of the V&A until a time judged by the embassy that it was safe and desirable for them to return to Yemen. Alia's practice expands into discourses of Yemeni futurism, where she offers counter-narratives to appropriation, violence, and disregard. Her research calls upon all histories to reframe nostalgic pasts and to confront dystopian realities of the present in order to carve out spaces for radically imagined futures.
I would like to thank Rachel, Georgia, and I'd like to thank all of you for your curiosity. I'll call it as it is. I am, of course, anxious, but I have to say that I'm so grateful for your curiosity and being here this evening. Our utopia of terraced mountains, ancient architecture, jewelry, textile, frankincense, and myrrh has become a dystopia of explosions, famine, disease, and suffering. Our land was looted of our most precious artifacts, which bear witness to cruelty that we have endured. They're imprisoned in collections far away, and we can't access the sites on which they're held captive. Like us, they are nomads, not by choice, but by consequence. We have been robbed of our archive, and our narrative is fragmented. And yet, there's a cosmic juncture. As children, we were told of a Nejm al-Ahmar, the Red Star, which was gifted to Bilqis, our ruler, the Queen of Saba, Sheba. It was gifted to her by Solomon, Suleiman, and he gave her a gift the size of her power. We inherited the Red Star. The Red Star becomes a site for our dreams and our futures. So if I dream of it, then I must have been there already. It's a sign that I exist not only here, now, in the present, but also there in the future. The first 7 years of my life were magical. My parents are linguists. They share 7 languages between them. They speak 7 languages between them, but they only share 1 language, and that's English. So as you can imagine, when I grew up, I was around tables where immediately in front of me, I would see mistranslations. I would see how language failed. However, my mother and my father insisted that we spoke Arabic. So my mother insisted that we went to a Yemeni school. And as we learned Arabic, she also insisted that we should go and travel with her to see other places. But because of visa restrictions, we went with her to different places in Asia and East Africa. That would include Lahore, Karachi, Mumbai, the time I might have been Bombay, Mumbai, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Nairobi, Zanzibar. And at the end, whether it was my brother and I came to know ourselves not as Arabs, but as Afro-Indo-Arabs, a participant in this millennia-age maritime exchange across the Indian Ocean. Alia Ali talks about the photograph. So people will call me perhaps a photographer. I appreciate people call me an artist with a capital A. People might silo and categorize me as a photographer, but in fact my practice has been very much about critiquing photography. If we think about photography, Alia Ali talks about three characters, possibly more, but let's go with the three characters that are involved in making a portrait. There's the photographer, there's the viewer, and then there's the photograph. So the photographer carries a camera. The camera is not necessarily a tool. In fact, it's a weapon. A weapon that when the camera came to Yemen, for example, who were the people that were in photojournalism, maybe the first people to be photographed? Perhaps the most innocent, because people would come and parachute. In fact, Steve McCurry came, took photographs of Yemen, definitely did not spend a lot of time, because the people who were photographed were women and young children who were lighting out the streets. But essentially, this was not capturing our royalty. It was not representing our royalty. It was capturing something that he just saw. So thinking about capture, to take, to shoot a photograph. So that's the power of the photographer, to hide behind it. And then you have the viewer, the consumer. Between the two, photographer and the viewer, we impose an idea on the photograph. The individual who's in the image, who has no agency. So let's say it's my grandmother, who fits into the Latin landscape, someone exotic, someone that might be seen as, in fact, even primitive. So I was in my studio and I would collect documents from different newspapers, different timelines from the UN, from CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Twitter, and why were so many things not being shown? Of course, it was also very hard to get information because the Saudis in Yemen had also restricted not only food and aid, but also press. So a lot of the press that was coming out of Yemen was not actually from Yemen, but it was in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. I don't know if the word is not inspired, I was enraged by an event that happened on the 9th of August 2018 in Lahya. It was called the Lahya Massacre, where 42 children were killed by an inaccurately targeted Lockheed Martin bomb. It's led by the Saudi coalition. Eventually, I would find that from these 42 children, you will see here a name that keeps repeating itself, Majhul, 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 which means the unknown. What I did eventually find about this binder, I ended up putting all the information inside a binder, which now there are 7 binders, because since that time it's been 7 years, although it shifted a little bit, was that a lot of the information was in fact redacted. So rather than redacting it, I was trying to highlight it. And at the end of the day, it really came down to weapons manufacturing companies, which for the next year, I really focused on a lot more. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing. There's even more actually that I can name than 5. And during this, Charles Gaines, really, if you don't know him, he's a very well-known artist, was one of my mentors, and he came into the studio and he looked at all this information, and there were threads that were trying to connect to each other, and I did a series that was called Under Threat. I wanted it had to be activated somehow and intervened with the body of work. And he said, and I was trying to convince him, Yemenis were dual citizens, we're productive citizens of several different countries, myself from Yemen and the United States. And he was listening, and I worked with different Yemeni diaspora, put all of this effort to show that we were, in fact, productive citizens. And he sat back and he said, Alia, you're right now in the witness box. What you need to do is get out of the witness box and go outside and make your work in the plaza and let people come to you. But do not justify those accusations of being a victim or a criminal, being seen as a victim or a criminal. And this became quite an important part in my practice because it's the only time, and the first time, that I showed eyes in any artwork that came out, and they were my own. What you see is the thread that was from the walls that were wrapped around my head and slowly unraveled. And as you see, the last image is actually me looking westward. rather than to look westward, where we see the United States, Europe, even the rest of the Arab world in the Middle East, North Africa, people who have ignored us, people who refuse to support us, but have all the intention of saying that our origins are from Yemen, or Yemen is the most ancient, has brought coffee and architecture. I chose to turn and look eastward at different countries that see us for our royalty and our beauty, the same countries that I traveled to as a child: Java, Zanzibar, Ethiopia, India, Burma, and that really bases itself a lot on the research that I'm doing here. It becomes healthier. It's more about a cyclical economic exchange that happened through a maritime trade. I can name different objects and materials: frankincense, myrrh, textiles, spices, even porcelain, animals. But when I think about the relationship with Yemen and moving westward, even northern, I think about weapons, extraction, occupation, land grabbing, and so forth. In the 1960s, the United States sent Wendell Phillips to Yemen, the looter, to take objects away. This one was named Maryam. It ended up in the Sackler collection, and only in 2022 was it then given to the Smithsonian. Inspired by Michael's letter, I decided also that I wanted to write a letter from the future, from 3,000 years from now. So my work in the Yemeni futurism is always 3,000 years forward. So 5,024, 5,025. This is a language that I've been developing that ties together Arabic, Hebrew, and Muslim, ancient Syrian, bringing back to life a language that perhaps people would consider as dead. I would integrate it into handwritten walls, murals that I would make, and as you can see in the back, there's also under thread, and how there's this shift, this moment in which beauty comes out of criminality, I suppose, and victimhood. Here, suddenly I start working with different materials. I found that this way of thinking was much more expansive. These are multi-video installations of a movie called Majja. I say the story through the eyes of a shapeshifter, a spider who travels between the time of Malika Balqis. Myself and Hawa are descendant from 3,000 years forward. This is a Yemeni man's warrior dance. Which is a Muslim dance. This is a woman's Jewish dance. And as you can see, they're from Earth and they get transported to the red star, Mars, an image that was found that I found from NASA. As a Yemeni, does that mean that because of this citizenship or because of my connection to the land that I have more of a power to tell the story? These are all questions that have been coming up as I'm here. But how do I put together that fragmented story as well? And then who fragmented it in the process?
أعطيني شوية فيدباك. إيش كان رأيك اليوم؟
صراحة ما توقعت إنه يكون المعرض اتجه لهذا المنحنى. أنا على بالي إنه بس بتكلم عن الآثار. بس الفنانة عالية شرحت عن معارضها، شرحت عن تاريخ اليمن، شرحت يعني حتى في السياسة دخلت.
صحيح.
يعني شيء كان جديد بالنسبة لي. وإنه كمان تكلمت عن المستقبل، إنه كيف بعد 3000 سنة إيش ممكن يصير أو إيش اليمن حتكون. شيء interesting. وإذا لاحظتي قالت إنها اخترعت لغة هي عملتها عربية وعبرية
جمعت اللغات القديمة. جمعت اللغات أتوقع القديمة مع بعض، صح؟ حطتها كذا كبيس في بعض، صح؟
وإنه هذه بعد 3000 سنة إنه ذاتهم شافها إيش ممكن يكون أو
ما كنت فاهم.
ما أعرف يعني هو شيء عن اليمن أو حاجة ما فهمت صراحة كثير. كثير بس interesting.
وسمعت كيف هي من البوسنة واليمن، بس تمسكها يعني
بالكلتشر
باليمن وبثقافة
أيوة.
اليمن وبكل التفاصيل هذه. حسيت إنه كان صراحة رائع inspiring. يعني إيش الفخر هذا إنه أنت من اليمن وأنت جايبة تاريخ اليمن وأنت تدوري على كل شيء طلع من البلد.
صح.
يعني بتريس وتجيبين الميوزيوم وتشرحي لهم تاريخهم.
أصلاً
It's fascinating.
هي واحدة سألتها يعني إنه كيف الواحد يعرف إنه مثلا هذا أو أنتم حتكونوا موجودين، اليمن حتكون موجودة بعد 3000 سنة، حتختفي، حتتغير اسمها. فاللي عجبني ردها قالت by insisting إنه إحنا اللي نثبت وجودنا.
صحيح.
فأتوقع إنه هذا شغلها إنها
صحيح.
تثبت وجودها.
صحيح. وبالفن
الفن. أيوة.
صحيح. الفن هو اللي يحفظ تراث البلد، وشخصيات زي علي علي نفتخر بوجودها
جدا جدا صراحة.
outside the whole globe يعني باليمن وبرا اليمن. شكرا نوال.